So I was watching this thing on YouTube the other day. It was an interview with a musician who will remain nameless, somebody that I've admired for a really long time and continue to, being interviewed. And they kept going on about him being a multi-instrumentalist and making a big deal out of that. Like, and I really wanted to hear about other stuff, like, so I was disappointed in it. And yeah, they just kept coming back to this multi-instrumentalist. Wow, you can play all these different things. And the different things were that, he's a wind player. And so, like, he plays flutes and saxophones and clarinets and like that. And those who have played those understand that they're kind of the same. Like, the mouth is different, and there's a trick with the clarinet that you have to learn. But basically speaking, the idea that fingering habits are kind of the same. The relationships, and so it's not that big a deal, right? Also he plays some percussion instrument, and he's a great musician. And I wanted to hear about, like, how he thought about music. Like, he's a composer as well, so I wanted to hear how he thought around that and how he thought around organizing people to play together, and interesting stuff that applies to somebody else instead of, oh man, you can play like 12 different instruments. And so I was thinking on it, and it's like, instruments are tools. And so that, does somebody call a carpenter a multi-toolist because he uses a square and a pencil and a saw and a hammer and a nail gun and like 4 different kinds of saws and chisels, and like, it's so stupid. Nobody would ever think of that. Like, if you're a carpenter, you're supposed to be able to use a bunch of tools around working with wood. Same with a welder, you use a bunch of different tools working around metal. If you're a mechanic, sometimes you use a screwdriver, and other times you use a wrench. Oh my God, a multi-tool user. So anyway, I think that's really stupid. And I would love to see us get away of this identification with, the specialization of, oh, this person plays this and this person plays that, and that's just, and they're not allowed to do other things, right? That's what keeps us in bondage in a way, right? Is that kind of specialization and that kind of identification with one thing, Shout out here to one of my, like, head and shoulders above the others musical heroes, Eric Dolphy, who played flute, clarinet, and saxophone, and sort of broke that thing for a lot of people about, he was one of the first jazz musicians to do that, and just one of the best musicians. Here's the thing, like, if you'd been sitting around with him and you needed a piano player, I bet he would have, like, been pretty good at that, or a drummer, or whatever, because, like, it's about the music. It's not about the ego identification with a single instrument, it's, or the ego identification of being a multi-instrumentalist. And I kind of think that thing, and they do this to kids, is when you start out, they, like, it's the first question people ask you if you're a musician, like, I'm talking to somebody I don't know, and, say I'm a musician. The first thing they ask is what instrument you play, and, I have fun with that. I say, oh, I played a couple of hundred of them, that's made as needed. And I think we'd get more deeply. See, here's what it is if you're restricted to playing a single instrument, it makes your contact with the structural basis of music kind of weak. You know, you only get to see it from, you know, it's those blind men and the elephant things. You know, if you're only playing this, you only see a trunk. And if you're only playing this, you only see a foot, you know. And obviously I think that the music itself needs some revitalization, needs some, you know, deeper thinking about it, and it's kind of more interesting ideas to go from instead of, you know, endlessly rehashing stuff they thought up 300 years ago. And I think it would be cool if, you know, younger folks coming up didn't think in that way of, okay, I'm going to be this guitar player and I'm going to be better than all the other guitar players, or I'm going to be this saxophone player and I'm going to be better than all the other saxophone players. Whatever, that puts you in the wrong from the start. And, you know, I came up just like that myself. You know, I'm not criticizing anybody for doing that. It's what you kind of get pushed into. And really, we make better music when people think less about themselves and more about what it sounds like. And if you don't identify so much with the musician, with a specific instrument, you're very much more likely to hear it on different ways and be less geared toward showing off on that instrument and much more geared on just making the whole thing sound good. You know, I remember this guitar player I used to play with, like, he just hated it so bad that like reggae music came along, and you could do the simplest thing. You could play 2 chords, you know, like if you're doing some dub thing, you just play 2 chords and you just put them in exactly the same place every time, you know, or if you're playing bass, you play like 4 notes, and and it just pissed the hell out of him because it sort of undermined the importance of what he thought of himself as. And what was funny about it was that, you know, he liked to smoke a lot, and so he'd get stoned and he loved listening to this stuff, you know, Augustus Pablo or, you know, LKJ and dub and stuff like that. It was great sounding music. And but he couldn't get to that by himself. Like if you played with him, you'd always have to like throw in a bunch of fills, or like, you know, needless to say, like, you know, we didn't have a great musical relationship. But, you know, the thing is to, you know, think about what are we doing and how does this sound, instead of what am I doing and how can I show up. So anyway, I think, you know, for anyone who's impressed by multi-instrumentalists, you know, that's just the stupidest thing in the world. Like, you know, take any analogy to anywhere in life, you know, like someone who cooks uses a spatula and a frying pan and, you know, a stock pot and an oven, you know. It's like, it's just the dumbest thing imaginable that a musician wouldn't play other instruments. And so, you know, if you're a musician and you just play one thing, play something else. You know, see what different ideas you get. Like, what we need much more than yet another like shredding guitar player or whatever, is people who think up different ways to get about the music. And yeah, you know,